Hello! I'm going to read the book today, Flat Stanley and the Bees. This is Flat Stanley and the Bees by Laurie Haskins Horan. Pictures by Mackie Patemanton. Flat Stanley and the Bees. Stanley Lamb Chop lived with his mother, his father, and his little brother, Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide and ½ an inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. Being flat didn't stop Stanley from eating just as much as a regularly shaped boy. "Are the honey buns done yet?" he asked one summer afternoon. "Not yet," Mrs. Lamb Chop said. "I don't even know why I'm baking. It's too hot today." "We'll cool you off," said Mrs. Lamb Chop. "Boys, let's do the fan." Stanley flung himself on the floor. Arthur folded him up like an accordion. He folded him up. Then Mr. Lamb Chop grabbed Stanley by the ankles and flapped him back and forth. Whoosh! "Much better," said Mrs. Lamb Chop. "Run outside and play, boys. I'll let you know when the buns are ready." "Let's go," said Stanley. "We can use our new slippery slide." Stanley loved the slippery slide. He always slid faster and farther than anyone else. Outside, Stanley and Arthur spotted Tom and Sam down the street. "Want to slide?" called Arthur. "Sure," said Tom. "Look how flat Stanley is. He's so flat." "Let's play tag," Sam said after a while. "Okay," said Stanley. "You're it." Stanley loved tag too. He could bend and twist, so he was almost impossible to catch. "How about hide and seek?" Tom suggested next. That was Stanley's favorite game of all. He fit into the best hiding places. "This is perfect," Stanley thought, curling up inside a tire swing. "No one will find me here." Then he heard a sound. "Eek!" someone cried. Stanley leaned out of the swing. "Found you," said Arthur. "No, you didn't," said Stanley. "Don't you hear that sound? I think someone's in trouble." The boys listened. "Eek!" came the cry again. Stanley and Arthur followed the sound up the hill. Sam hurried after them. "Bzzz! What's going on?" Sam asked. Before Stanley could answer, he heard another sound, an angry sound. Bzzz! "Oh no!" said Arthur. "It's Tom!" Their friend stood like a statue. Too scared to move, a swarm of bees buzzed around him. "I was hiding behind a tree," Tom squeaked. "I must have bumped a beehive. Eek!" "Arthur!" yelled Stanley. "Let's do the fan." "Got it," said Arthur. Stanley flung himself on the grass. Arthur folded him up like an accordion. Then Arthur grabbed Stanley by the ankles and tried to flap him up and down, but he couldn't do it. Stanley was too heavy. He had helped before, right? Flapping. Sam rushed over to help. 1, 2, 3, flap! Arthur called. Together they fanned Stanley with all of their might. Whoosh! The blast of air blew the bees away, but not very far. The boys took off down the hill. The bees came right after them. They're catching up, Tom yelled. Then Stanley saw something. The slippery slide. Stanley let the others sit on top of him. Whiz! They sailed along and landed with a yellow, wet plop at the lamb chop's back door. The boys raced inside. So did the bees. Here they come, moaned Arthur. Eek! Tom squealed. But then the swarm swerved. They swerved. That means they took a different turn. What? Where? Began Stanley. Then he gasped. The honey buns! Sure enough, the sweet, sticky buns were covered with sweet, sticky bees. Uh-oh, no more honey buns. Oh dear, cried Mrs. Lambchop, walking into the kitchen. Then Miss Lambchop started to laugh. It is too hot for warm buns anyway. You know what? You know what we need, boys? Ice cream. Yum. The end. What'd you think about that book? Flat Stanley and the Swarm of Bees. Thanks for listening.